Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe. Hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. If you are tuning in live here on Behance, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got Abdullah and Robert and Cody and Jack. Great to see all of you. If you're just joining, definitely throw your name in the chat. And if you have questions throughout this masterclass, definitely throw them in there as well. I will be taking a peek from time to time. All right, so masterclass number 102. We're going to be continuing the process of our music application that we've been building over the last 2 weeks, except we're going to be transitioning to the mobile experience. And we're going to be talking a lot about what goes into transitioning to mobile. It's not as easy as just like squishing things together. You'll often have to completely rethink the entire experience for different devices, right? Sometimes, depending on what you're designing, you can have completely different user bases on desktop and mobile, right? So we're going to be talking a lot about that stuff. Let me go ahead and hop over to Finder or Safari just for 1 second. And hey, Benjamin and Katerina and Anika, great to see you. And Ezatula, great to see you as well. All right, so here is a look at what we've been designing over the last 2 weeks. I don't think we covered dark mode last week. Possibly not, but we continued the lighter version. And then today we're gonna be transitioning over to mobile. I'm not sure how many screens we're gonna get to, but we're gonna be starting off with this screen, which is the now playing screen, which is gonna have various effects on it. We may even incorporate Lottie and some plugins. We'll see where we go, right? So we're going to definitely dive into that. And this particular design is going to be the darker version. And maybe we'll kind of convert that over to light as well. We'll see. We'll see how things go. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop into Adobe XD and we are going to start designing. Now, considering this is the mobile version, we're going to start with a mobile preset. So over to the left, I'm going to grab my artboard tool, shortcut key A. And over to the right, got a bunch of presets from all the different iPhones to the Google Pixels, Samsung Galaxy S10, or of course, if you have specific dimensions you want to use, you can definitely enter those as well. But I'm going to start with an iPhone 13, 12 Pro Max, and probably, what month is it? August? Probably in a month or two, we're going to get another iPhone, and I'm sure there'll be more dimensions to work with. So it's always fun when iPhone season comes around. All right, so we have our artboard and we're gonna name this Now Playing. Hey, Drew. Drew says, happy Friday. I agree. Kesha, great to see you as well from Birmingham, Alabama. Haven't been to Alabama yet. I think I've driven through Alabama, possibly, but I haven't actually stayed there. All right, so like I mentioned, we're gonna be working on the mobile version for the Now Playing screen, but also the darker version. Now, ideally, you would have the lighter version and the darker version, right? Don't know if we'll have time for that, but we're going to switch things up and work on dark. Now, in terms of the artboard color, here's a bit of a discussion to start off the class with, right? In many cases, especially when we've been working on desktop experiences. Hey, Paul, great to see you, and Talha, great to see you as well. He says, I have my first UI and UX job and your videos help me a lot. That's great. Any tips? Oh boy. Any tips? Just kind of go with the flow. I know it could be very nerve-wracking to get your first UI and UX job. Don't overthink things. Just kind of go with it and don't be afraid to mess up because you will. I mess up all the time. Professional designers who have been doing this for years and years and decades, they mess up all the time. So don't be afraid to mess up. Be honest with yourself, be honest with your team, and just kind of work together. I don't know how many people are on your team. Have fun with it, right? And definitely look at inspiration. Don't be afraid to do that as well. All right, so on the desktop, right? We've definitely gone with something like a darker color with a little bit of, blue or purple or something to that effect, right? And we may end up doing that on this screen, but specifically for mobile devices, one thing you want to keep in mind is that many of these mobile devices now have OLED displays or something similar, right? And that really takes advantage of black. And you might be asking, you typically don't use pure black. Why are you using pure black in this case? Well, if you are on an OLED display, using pure black is wonderful for battery life, right? Because it basically doesn't use any, like, there's no light that, or very little light, that makes it through that screen, right? It's the way it's built. I don't understand any of it, engineering things, but definitely keep that in mind, right? And in some cases, I've actually seen some applications offer 3 different versions of their themes: light, dark, and basically black, right? Which is great for OLED. So keep that in mind if you're designing, right? In this case, we're gonna add a little bit of color, maybe a little bit of purple, because there will be some pinks and purples and some fun colors on this particular experience. All right, now let's start off at the top. We're gonna start off with some basic elements, and then we're gonna work our way down. First thing we want to add is a back button. This will be the now playing screen. So you've gotten to this screen somehow, and in many cases, you'll wanna go back to other screens, right? So I'm gonna drag out some guides just to start, and we'll go about, let's say, 32 pixels from the left and the right. Of course, if you're not using the 8-pixel grid, you can do 10 pixels, or you can do, who knows, right? And if you are using an 8-pixel grid, you can do 24. 24 is not bad. We might switch it up a little bit. We will see. And you also want to keep in mind that on many mobile devices, especially iPhones, there's a notch. The lovely notch at the top, which is approximately somewhere, in this range here, somewhere up 45, 46 pixels from the top. So you want to make sure nothing is up there, because users won't be able to tap on things. There are elements up there like the time and the Wi-Fi bars and all sorts of fun stuff, right? So don't put anything up there. So let's actually drag another guide out. Let's do about 40, about 40, I don't know, 45, sure. And then we're going to start with our back button. Now, of course, we could grab an icon from various icon sets, or we can activate our square grid, press the letter P to grab our pen tool, and boop, and boop, and boop, right? Let's make this a little bit thicker. Boop, boop, boop. Change the color to white. And, the square caps are not bad, but I might want to round them out a little bit. So right down here within the Properties Inspector, we can round out not just the caps, but also the joints as well, right? Did you notice what happens? Let me move this over here. You'll take a look at the corner right here, right? When I round out, when I round out the joints, it just kind of very subtly rounds that out, which is kind of nice, right? All right, I'm gonna place that right about here. Take a quick peek. That might be still a little bit too high. I might want to bump that down just a little bit more, right? That could work. All right. Now over to the right, we're going to probably want some sort of a menu icon, or, more actions to do things to the song. I don't know what you would do to a song, but you might want to do specific action. Now, it might not be things like liking the song, because that might be visible, but maybe, hide song, or see more songs like this, or add to playlist, or who knows what, right? So we'll add something, a little circle like this. Maybe we'll change the color. Get rid of that border. Hey, Umacorn, happy Fancy Friday indeed, right? And then on the inside of this, we're going to want a little menu item. That could work, right? Probably not perfect, might be a little bit not spaced out enough, but we're going to run with it for now. I'm going to group that, Command and Control G, and then in the center, we're going to probably want text to kind of let users know what screen we are on. So I'm going to grab the text tool, shortcut key T, click, and we'll just type out now playing. Now, in terms of the typeface, in the previous designs that we worked on the desktop, we were using a typeface I found on Adobe Fonts called Forma DJR Text. And someone in the chat let me know that DJR is the designer who created this typeface. Now, I've been experimenting on the side, and I was thinking to switch the typefaces over completely. So I'm probably going to use two different typefaces. For the headers, I'm going to be using New Order, which is also available on Adobe Fonts. It's a little bit more stylistic than the next typeface we're going to be using in just a moment. And I'm going to bump this down to about 18 possibly, and position it in the center. I can also use the alignment and distribution options right here at the top to very quickly align it to the center if it did not snap for whatever reason, right? And that looks pretty good. And then we're going to get into the other typeface that we're going to be using in just a moment, which is Astoria Sans, which I've been using a lot lately. Really nice typeface. But we have our header group, and I'm going to call this header. Beautiful. Now, the next thing I might want is a nice large image of the album or song cover, right? So for that, I'm going to grab my ellipse tool. Now you might be asking, why are you grabbing an ellipse, right? Sometimes it's square, sometimes it's an ellipse. So here's, if I were to grab a square, it'd be something like this. And of course, depending on the style of your application, you can certainly go in either direction. I'm using an ellipse because I want to show you a plugin that I've shown before, and I just absolutely love. And I'll get to that in just a moment. So we have our ellipse here, and this is where the album artwork is going to be placed, right? And speaking of the album artwork, if I hop over to, and let's see, where is Finder? I lost Finder. There we go. I have a bunch of artwork that I've been generating using Midjourney, AI generated art. I know a lot of you have different opinions on AI art. I absolutely love it. I think future's weird, right? Future's very weird. But I have some AI art that I might want to use in this particular design. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that in there. I can double click to shift it down a little bit, just like that. There we go. Now, I did use an ellipse, right? And I did mention I might want to use a plugin. So if I hop over to my plugins at the bottom left-hand corner, and by the way, I'm going to little self-promotion, sort of. But I've been, all this AI art that I've been generating, I've been uploading to Twitter and on Instagram. The account for both of them is generative. I don't even know why I named it this. I can't even pronounce it properly. Generative boops. Generative, like, AI generated type of thing. I don't know. It's fun. I don't know if this is going to go anywhere, but I find AI art incredibly fascinating and also kind of creepy, right? But that's the fun about AI art. You can go in so many different directions. And I can't wait to see how the future kind of unfolds with this weirdness. But anyways, where was I? Right, the plugin. So I have my ellipse, right? And I might want to kind of curve out the corners a little bit. Now, of course, I could do that with a rounded rectangle, but sometimes you just want a squircle, right? So the Super Ellipse plugin, which you can grab in your plugins, I can just go ahead and grab this slider and do something like that. And it's just a bit of a different feel, right? As you can see there. It's kind of fun. So it's not completely like a rounded rectangle. It's a little bit different. It's fun. Now, I don't know if I'm going to actually end up doing this, and I'll show you why in just a little bit, because we're going to put something behind it, more, like almost like sound waves kind of, right? So I might end up kind of bringing this back a little bit, but we'll see. Now, down below, we might want to highlight the name of this particular song. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my text tool one more time and type out something like psychedelics, because this guy is definitely grooving over here. And I'm going to make this text quite a bit larger. That's quite big, right? Now, I think in the case of the song title, we can probably get a little bit more stylistic, depending on how large the text is and also how much room you have, We might not have if the title of the song is, 7 words long, you may not want to get too crazy with it, but I can switch over to something like, Oh No Blazeface, which is another typeface you can grab on Adobe Fonts, right? Maybe I'll shrink this down just a little bit, somewhere around 28 possibly, right? I'll pop that right about there. And then right below that, we're going to want possibly the album name or some sort of secondary information about this particular song or album, right? So it might be something like Flowing Colors. Now, since this is secondary information, we may not necessarily want it as large as the title. So the first step is to drop the size. Now, I've talked about this a lot in the past. When you're working with display typefaces, like this one here, right? You typically don't want to keep that display typeface for small body copy. Because, if I'm zoomed in like this, we can read this pretty well. But if I preview this, not so much. Some of you might be able to, right? But a lot probably won't. So that's where we're going to kind of drop back to our additional typefaces. And we can try out our new order typeface that we've been using at the top of our header. And that doesn't look too bad, right? A lot more legible at this point. And we can try out bold, we can try out medium or semi-bold, a lot of different weights we can try out. And we can even drop the opacity just a little bit. You don't want to go too much, because then you're dealing with accessibility issues, right? Somewhere around 70% could work. You can also add a little bit of color in there if you wanted to, considering our background is slightly purple. But when you drop the opacity, a little bit of color will kind of bleed in as well, right? Paul says, I love that font. I do too. I spend so much time on Adobe fonts just browsing these really interesting typefaces. And let me actually show you for a second. One thing that's really cool, here's Adobe, that's Adobe stock, also great. But here, if you type out, let's say, oh no, Blazeface. Let's say you found this font, right? And you scroll down and you want something similar. There's a lot of different variations of this, but there's also a section at the bottom for recommendations. So you can find fonts like Oh No Blazeface. So if you wanted something like that, but similar, right? There's Oh No Fat Face, which is really interesting, right? So there's a lot of different typefaces you can find. Marshmallow, a little bit difficult to read, but that's the idea, right? And if you go to all fonts, and then over on the left-hand side, you can really break that down from funky to luxurious to friendly, geometric. I spend way too much time. Look at this one. This one's fun. Crayon. And you can type out something like, right? And it's going to show you a preview. That is kind of fun. I don't know when I would actually use this particular typeface. Oh, look, it's also made by DJR. There you go. But that's fun, right? Maybe for a nice large poster, something like that, right? Matt is asking, what is the font for psychedelic? So this one is Oh No Blazeface, which in some way is very fitting for this dude. That's all I'm going to say. All right. So we have this, right? And that looks pretty good. And now moving on down, we're going to want a few additional elements. We're going to want our progress bar to show how far in the song we are. And then we're going to want our control, our play, our back, our shuffle, possibly our like. And then, we'll see what we need to do next. So in terms of the progress bar, we're going to make this very simple. View, a line across, just like that. And we're going to thicken out the line. So right now it's at 1. Definitely don't want that. Boop, 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 boop. 8. And we can also round out the caps. Now, if you are really sticking to that grid, when you do round out the caps, it kind of bumps it out just a little bit, as you can see here, right? So I might just want to take this back just a touch. Like, Martin is asking, any thoughts on font pairing, especially when dealing with display fonts like the one you are using for Psych? It's a big question, Martin. And there's really no right answer for this, but if I do go back to the Oh No Blazeface page, I think right below recommendations, font pairings, look at that. It depends, right? Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes it's going to shift based on your experience. And I don't mean your personal experience, but the experience you're designing, right? Sometimes you'll want a serif typeface. Sometimes you'll want a sans serif typeface. But some of these are pretty good. I would definitely start here. If you're not too familiar with how different typefaces kind of work together, I would start towards the bottom of this page to kind of get some ideas. But honestly, a lot of it is just trial and error, right? It's, one of the other typefaces I mentioned earlier was the Astoria Sans typeface, which is also nice. It's very simple, it's very clean, but it has some fun elements to it. But the reason I ended up going with New Order is because it's slightly more stylistic than something like Astoria Sans or Helvetica or Basic Sans or something like that, right? And finding a sans serif typeface that has a little bit of style to it can kind of complement your display typefaces depending on how stylistic those are, right? So it really depends. But I mean, you can never really go wrong with something like Helvetica. And again, the smaller you get for your text layers, the more basic you're going to want to be, right? Trial and error. That's kind of where I've landed with a lot of things in design, trial and error. And a lot of designers they'll talk to you about the rules of type and the rules of this and color and all these sorts of things. And sure, some of it is valid, but a lot of it is very fluid. So don't pay attention to rules. Sometimes, but not all. All right. So we've got our line for our progress bar, but we're going to want actually 2 or 3 different elements. One, we're going to want our unplayed or our entire progress bar, and then how much we've actually played. Now for this one, we can either, select white and then drop it down a little bit, but we do have a slightly purple background. So I might want to go into that purple range and do something like this. Just add a little bit of purple in there, right? Beautiful. And then we're going to want our progress. So how much of the song we've actually played. So I'm going to duplicate this particular layer, Command and Control D, and grab this handle and drag it on back. Now, of course, because both of these lines are the exact same color, can't see anything, right? So we're going to change the color. Now, in our previous designs, we were using this kind of like a purplish blue or a blurple, I love that word, for our highlight color. Now, if we were to use the exact same color, see, do I have it in? Yeah, I have it here. So I'm going to right click and apply border. That color looked great in the lighter experience. And let me remind you, right? There's that color there. Looks beautiful against a lighter background. But when you start adding that particular color against a darker background, becomes a bit muddy, right? So what you usually will want to do is if you want to use a nice vibrant color against a darker background, is you'll likely want to just bring out some of the opacity. Not the opacity, I mean maybe sometime, but the saturation, right? Something in this range, right? And look at the difference. Before, after. It's relatively subtle, but it's a little bit easier on the eye. I don't know what it is, but the very vibrant color. Megan says it's buzzing. I like that. I've heard muddy, I've heard buzzing. Buzzing, yeah, right? Before, after. So just bringing out a little bit of that saturation will just kind of calm it down a little bit, so it's not buzzing as much. Took a fly swatter to a bee. I don't even know what that means, but it works with buzzing, I suppose. All right, now over top of it, we're typically going to want some sort of a handle, not just to help indicate where you are in that song, but also to help you very easily scrub through the song, right? So with the ellipse tool, shortcut key E, I'll draw out my lovely ellipse. There we go. And I'm going to want to style this a little bit. And there's really 2 ways you can do this. We're going to want a border and a fill. We're going to start with the border, set the border at white, and the fill, we're going to sample this color that we just set. And maybe we will, something like that, right? That's option number 1. Option number 2, I mean, honestly, there's probably a million options. Option number 2 is to basically flip it. So the border would be purple and the fill would be white. So it kind of blends in with the progress bar a little bit. And if you want to pop it a little bit, you can also add a bit of a drop shadow, right? Something like that. Very subtle drop shadow. See that? Very subtle, just kind of pops a little bit. But of course, there are some more simple options where you can just basically have a white, right? What do you all think? Do you like pure white, the purple with white, or the white with purple? 1, 2, or 3. I'm going to leave these here. I would love to see in the chat what you think. Again, 1, 2, or 3, and then we'll set that in a moment. And then underneath, we're going to want our text. And this is going to indicate, again, in addition to kind of complement the slider, is how far into the song you are. So we might have like 1 minute and 42 seconds. Maybe I'll left align this one. And we're going to want our typeface. So we can try new order for this. And maybe we'll sample this color. Ooh, it's a bit too dark, I think. Bump that up a touch, right? Something like that. And we can also try Astoria Sans. More decision, right? Now, of course, ideally, you probably don't want too many typefaces. And we've already used two. We have new order at the top for our headers, and then we have the Oh No Blaze face for our display typeface. So the question is, do we really want another typeface, in this case, Astoria Sans, or do we want to stick with new order? I find Astoria Sans, especially for a text layer that's this small, a little bit more easier to read. But these are decisions you definitely have to make. So Abdullah says 2, Martin says 1, Lauren says 2, Ezatullah says 2, Muhammad says 1. Very indecisive. So we have 2, 2, 2, 1, 1. Oh, Paul says 2. All right, 2 it is. Beautiful. All right. And one more thing I should probably mention, I mention this a lot, is, when you're designing this close, I'm sure some of you are sick of me saying this, but when you're designing zoomed in, hit the preview button, right? Boop. Gives you a little bit more of a better perspective of how things are looking. And if you have a phone that's linked up to your computer, or you have the Creative or the Adobe XD app downloaded and you're working with a cloud document, preview it on your phone. It'll really give you a nice look at how things are looking, right? But I think, we're going to stick with the new order typeface, which is this one here, just to keep a little bit of consistency. And then on the other side, it'll be something like 4 minutes, and I'm not going to do it. Nope. 90? No. There we go. Beautiful. All right. We're getting there. Now, I'm not too happy with the sizing. I'm also not too happy with the spacing, but we're going to adjust a few things in just a moment. Group, and then down below, probably the most important elements of a screen like this are the controls. Play, forward, back, shuffle, repeat, like, that sort of thing, right? Now, on the previous designs, we have these elements here. So if you have some elements already that you've been working with, you might as well grab them and adapt them, right? So I'm going to copy these. Even though these are for the lighter version, we can very easily make some changes and kind of run with it. Now, we're going to definitely want these to be a little bit larger and probably space them out a touch as well. So I'm going to turn off my stack for now, and let's make these a little bit larger. Maybe I'll space them out a touch. Let me bring out my guides again. Now for these, I'm actually going to go ahead and switch the color over to more of a lighter color. And I think we're going to get a little bit stylistic with this particular play button. Now this is a component at the moment, mainly for the lighter version. So I'm actually going to ungroup this particular element here. Now what I'm thinking is, because we're kind of going with a fun stylistic vibe to this particular design, we might want to bring in kind of like a blob or a sound wave or some sort of a design to really highlight the play button, right? Is there a super secret shortcut for preview? Matt says. There is, Matt. So it is, let me see if it shows it on here. It does not. Does it show it anywhere? That's a good question. Play. Actually, preview maybe? Does it show the short? There it is. So under the object, where was it? It was there a second. Oh, under the window menu. There it is. So Command or Control and then Return. I think on the Windows it is Control Return, and on Mac it is yeah. There you go. All right. Hey Hisham, great to see you. How can I share these fonts with the developer team. So as long as the developer team has, a Creative Cloud subscription of some sort, they'll have access to these fonts with Adobe Fonts, right? But what's nice is when you share this, so under the share mode, when you share this with for development, then they'll actually be able to see all the different typefaces, all the different fonts and the weights and all that fun stuff that you've been using in this project. So they can basically just kind of follow that guide, right? Which is kind of nice. And on Adobe Fonts, you can add to, where did it go? Add to web project. So you'll be able to add these specific fonts to your project. You'll be given basically one line of code that your developers can add into their website. That'll just bring these fonts in from Adobe Fonts, and you'll be able to use them. Now, not all fonts are web friendly. Most are, but not all of them are. So definitely check, if you're going to be using this on the web, definitely make sure you can add it to a web project, right? All right. So again, we're going to want to get a little bit fancy with these controls. Now, over in my Creative Cloud libraries, I do have some blobs that I license from Adobe stock, and something like this could be kind of interesting. Now, I wouldn't always recommend something like this on a project like this, but if we're getting a little bit stylistic, we're having some fun with it, why not, right? So I'm going to place it somewhere back here. Let me move it around. Ooh, very zoomed in, aren't I? There we go. I'm going to change actually, I can probably just hide this particular element, and we have our white play button. Is it necessary? Probably not. But is it fun? Absolutely, right? It also kind of messes up with the alignment, right? It looks like there's a lot more space on this side than this side. But it just looks fun. Not practical. It's just, but it's fun. I'm going to group this and move this up a little bit. And then the final thing we're going to add on this screen is right at the bottom. You might want some sort of a call to action to see more songs or a playlist or something to that effect. Now, you don't want it too much in your face because you want to kind of take away from the overall experience of the song, the album, the controls, and all that fun stuff, right? I'm going to actually grab this little chevron down here or up there, and then we'll do just something like up, next. Something like that. Matt says Command W closes the preview window and not the whole file. Yeah. So also one thing you should, thank goodness for cloud documents, because I find myself doing this all the time. What I'll do is I'll launch the preview, right? I'll put the preview over here just so I can have the preview open while I am designing. And I'll just, keep designing away like this, right? Semi-bold, and I'll put this about here and blah, blah, blah. And then I'll realize that my preview is open. And usually when I'm previewing something, the preview window will be active. So I'll just, naturally just hit Command and Control W, or in my case, Command W, and the whole document will close because I have the actual document in focus and not the preview window. But because I'm working in the cloud, it's all saved. Even if I move something around and then immediately close the document, it's still going to make that save, and then it's going to close the document. So rest assured, it's saved. All right, now that I am looking at this, nothing is lining up. Everything is looking a little bit strange. So we're going to make a few additional changes, right? All right. One, I'm going to make this a little bit larger. Let's try about 32. So we do have some room, right? And then this guy here, I might also want to make a bit larger. And I mentioned a bit earlier that we might want to put something extra behind this. And you'll sometimes see this when you are inside of a music app. There'll be some like flashing, not flashing to the extent that it'll be dangerous, but like a little bit of moving sound waves kind of, right? And sometimes it'll be on like a progress bar, and sometimes it'll be behind the album artwork. Very subtle, right? And there are a few ways we can do that. One, we can try a Lottie animation. So if we hop down here to our plugins, we can go to our Lottie Files plugin, which is wonderful because it gives you access to thousands of free Lottie animations that you can use in projects. You can also go to lottiefiles.com and you can browse there as well. And someone reminded me last week that you can also change the color of some of the Lottie files directly on Lottie files. So you can type out something like sound waves, and we're going to look for a circular one, right? Maybe circular waves, something like that. Let's try that. There we go. So we have some, basic. Now these are free, so you're probably not going to get very high quality premium Lottie animations. They do have premium ones on the Lottie Files website, but something like this you can definitely add in to your project, right? And I will remind a lot of you that the preview, depending on how large you have it set, will look a little bit blurry and pixelated. But when you actually go to preview, right? It's kind of fun, right? I think there is another one. I found another one, some circular sound maybe. There was another one that kind of looked a little bit better. I don't know where it is. Well, actually, you know what? I can, do I have it still in this other document? I do. All right, I'm going to steal it from there. Forget what exactly I looked for. But something like, where did it go? There we go. Right, so this was also from the Lottie Files plugin. Place it in the back. And, right, again, it's not very high quality. It's not premium, but it might help kind of convey what you're going for, right? Or if you just want something a little bit more static and you're not too concerned about motion, then another file from Adobe stock could work. So I have this one here that I saved in a Creative Cloud library. It was originally an Illustrator file, which you can definitely open in XD, but I did open this one in Illustrator because it did have some very complex gradients that I had to deal with before I was able to bring it into XD. But you can just kind of pop it in the back just like that, and you've got something fun, right? And what's nice about this is you can also experiment with some blend mode. So I can switch it over to screen or something like color dodge, and you get, fun, some different effects. There we go. And I think what I might want is a little bit of more separation from the album artwork and the sound waves in the back. So I'm very simply going to apply a border that's the same color as the background and just kind of bump this up to about maybe 10, maybe 8. Right? Just to add a little bit of separation there. And now I have nice little sound waves. I can maybe move this down a touch, right? And then I can really start kind of setting everything in place. Martin says, fits well with the psychedelic aesthetic. I agree. And that's kind of why I added these additional elements. Again, is it practical? Is it necessary? Probably not, right? But if you're really going for a specific vibe to your designs, why not, right? Kind of fun. It works. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now that we have a little bit more time, we have about 25 minutes left. Let's work on the next screen, which would, I suppose, be the previous screen. How do we get to this screen? And that might come from the home screen. So let's go ahead and boop, we're going to add one more screen. We're going to use the same color for the background to keep nice and consistent. And we're going to, let me actually grab the header and paste it over here. Now, let's talk a little bit about how each screen could be slightly different, could be drastically different, right? I added this header here. But of course, if you're on your home screen, you're probably not going to want a back button, right? So we might want to keep this menu button over here, because there might be a menu of some sort on this screen. But we're going to want something else over to the left-hand side. We don't want that back button. So there's a few different ways we can do this. Let me actually just copy our guides and paste them over here. Boop. All right, so we have a few options, right? We can either place something else on this side here. And up here could be something like a profile photo, right? And that will give you access to your profile or an additional menu of some sort. So if I go into, let's say, my Toy Faces library, and boop, there we go. We have a profile, right? This would be changed to home. So we can do something like that. Or we can stylize it a little bit more. And we can maybe put the profile photo over to the left or the right. I'm going to change that in just a second. We can move this over to the left, right? And maybe we can make this a little bit larger. We can possibly make this, I don't know, 28 possibly. That might be a bit too big, but we'll see, right? So we can do something like that, right? And maybe I would probably swap the position of these, or maybe the profile would actually end up being the menu of some sort. And then you can add this. This could be maybe a notification bell, because maybe this application is heavy on notification, right? So there are definitely a few ways we can go about kind of structuring this particular screen. I'll leave it at that for now. And then going down this artboard, we're going to definitely want a few different things. We're going to want things like maybe a featured song or album. We're going to want maybe recently played, recommendations, and of course at the bottom, we're going to want a navigation bar. And this is kind of interesting, right? So we have down here, we have a navigation bar. We'll just kind of block this out for now. Something in this range here. And this would have things like a link to your home, favorites, search, albums, so on and so forth. You might have, 3 to 5 links down there. But for an experience like a music application, you have to remind yourself that depending on where you are in the application, this navigation bar may be there, it may not be there. A screen like this, navigation bar may not necessarily make sense because you may want to focus on all the other information, right? Which definitely takes up more room. But on a screen like the home screen, the navigation bar absolutely makes sense. However, there are times when you have a song actively playing, right? So where do you put that? How do you show that that song is playing? How do you give your users control over that song while also keeping the navigation bar there? And I think Spotify does a great job with this. They have their navigation bar at the bottom, but also right above, they have this little tiny bar that shows just a little bit, and you can definitely break the bounds in this particular case. But it has this little bar right about here that gives a little bit of a preview of your song. It'll show the album artwork, it'll show the song title, and very basic controls, play, back, forward, right? And I think that's a great solution for an experience like this. It keeps it nice and simple, but it also gives your users the controls that they want, right? So let's go ahead and style this a little bit. Navigation bar. We're going to want to definitely keep it on the darker side, right? And we can experiment with a background blur in just a moment once we start adding some content behind it. But in terms of the actual icons, I'm going to go ahead and hop over to Nucleo. Type out something like home. And this one's kind of fun. I'll pop this here. Change that to white. And this will be the active screen, right? So I'm going to make this a little bit larger. Let's try about 32. Again, pop open that preview just to make sure it's not too small. It might be, but we will see. Definitely going to want to make this quite a bit smaller. Let's try about 16. That's a little bit too large still. 14 maybe. Center that. Maybe I'll make this a touch larger. Is 40 too big? It might be. But we're only going to have about 4 icons down here, so it might work. We will see. And then we're going to want something like favorites, right? Now, we could, of course, search for a heart, right? We can bring one in. Or we can grab our polygon tool over to the left, shortcut key Y. We're going to draw out a polygon. And then over within the properties inspector, less than 3. It's kind of that, little heart emoji, and boop, we now have a heart. Now, this is going to be the inactive screen. So we're not on the favorite screen, right? So there are a few ways we can potentially display this. One, we can revert to a border, right? So we'll do something like that, and maybe I'll put it on the center and just bring this in a little bit. And I should probably grab some guides just so I have everything lined up and the same size. right? So we can do that. We can also use a fill, but a darker color, right? So something like this. Now, personally, I prefer the border for the inactive and the solid for the active, only because it's a little bit easier to work with in terms of accessibility, right? When you're keeping everything solid, but you're darkening the inactive icons, you're definitely getting in the range of kind of muddying accessibility and, ruining the experience for some users, right? But when you're working with this, you can still keep the exact same color, right? But the border will tell you it's inactive, right? And the solid color will tell you it's the active screen. So we're going to run with that. And this will be favorites. Wow. There we go. And then we're going to want a search icon. And I will remind you all that if you do not have icons at your disposal, you can definitely go into a plugin like the Icons for Design plugin, and you can download some straight from there. There we go. And search. Let me take a quick peek. Ooh, those are way too large. Again, the benefit of launching that preview and taking a quick peek, right? Let's bring this down a little bit. 32. Set my guides again. Yeah, close enough. Bring this down. That's probably a little bit better. I definitely don't think that the bold weight is going to work for this particular link. So I might want to just drop it to something like semi-bold, right? I can select both of these, semi-bold. I think that could potentially work. And then we'll want probably something like albums, right? And I do have an album icon that I designed on this screen, so I can just bring this over, change the color. There we go. Now I'm going to go through and just group some of these very quickly. And I'll name this albums. Search, favorites, and home, right? All right. Move that over there. Move this over here. And let's see what this looks like if I line this up. That could work. I might want to make this a little bit larger. Maybe move these up a little bit. And just like at the top on an iPhone where you have to worry about the notch, at the bottom there's a home indicator. Now it's not as large as the notch, thankfully, but it's something like, right about here. It's closer to the bottom of the screen, but you definitely don't want anything down there that your users are going to need to tap on. So definitely keep that in mind, right? That's why I usually add a little bit of space up at the top. Or I guess I should say at the bottom, right? Something like that. I still think the icons are a little bit too large. Oops. But that could do, right? All right. Now again, we have this bar right up here at the top, or above the navigation bar, that's going to give us a bit of a preview of the song in question, song or album, or whatever it might be. So let me use the same color as this for now. We may change that. We can also add a bit of a border around the side. Maybe I'll just drop the opacity of that border to about 8 just to kind of blend it in a little bit. Maybe I'll round out the corners to, we'll try 8 as well. And then on the inside, we're going to want our album artwork. I'm going to round out the corners. Now, I've talked about this before as well. When you're working with a rounded rectangle inside a rounded rectangle, you'll typically not want to use the exact same values, right? So this one over here in the background is 8 in terms of the corner radius. This one, if you were to do 8 as well, visually, it just looks a bit strange, right? Especially if you launch your preview. So you'll just want to bring it back a little bit to about 6 possibly, maybe even 5. 5 is not a great number, but you know, something like that could work. And if I hop over to Finder, I do have some more of my crazy and wacky AI generated artworks. I mean, look at this. Isn't that bizarre? And all of these things are just like I totally get the concern from artists. It's a weird gray area right now with AI art, but I'm just having so much fun generating these weird and creepy artworks. Anyways, I'm going to drag one in, and I'm going to clever, right? Probably. Probably not. I think I'm clever, but I'm usually probably not. A little too large. Boop, boop. And then over to the right, we're going to want our basic controls, things like play, forward, and back. And we can definitely grab, let's say, our play button, our back, and our forward. Paste those in there. Bring them together a little bit. Responsive resize does its thing. Shrink them down a touch. Right? Now, one other thing that Spotify does that I think is kind of fun is they actually, this bar, the background, the color of it, actually shifts a little bit based on the album artwork, right? So in this case, what we might want to do is grab the container and maybe sample like one of these. That might be a bit too light. Or what we can do is we can kind of just shift it manually. Something like that, right? Just bring in some color from this album artwork, right? And we can also adapt these icons as well. So I can shift them a little bit, add some color, just to add a little bit of a pleasing experience. Maybe I'll bring this down a touch. Cornell's asking, what do you use to generate these images? So these ones in particular were done using Midjourney, which I think is in open beta right now. And I've done some others with Dolly, but it's not as artistic as Midjourney, that's for sure. All right, I'm going to group that. Now, I did mention earlier, and we have like 3 minutes, so we can probably do this, is, you know, I would probably consider a background blur on this container back here. So, and to help me with that, I might want some content, right? Just so that there's something in the background to actually blur. So if I hop over to Finder again, I'm going to, let's find some more creepy, weird images. Boop, grab that one. I'll make this larger. And then we'll grab, what's another one that's kind of weird and creepy, strange and psychedelic? This one's kind of fun. Grab, boop, there we go. So we have these two images. I'll round out the corners a little bit to about 8. Oh, 8 might be a bit too much, actually. Let's try 4. And I'm going to make sure that these images are in the background. That way, I can now select the container of this navigation bar and start experimenting with the background blur. So I'm going to turn on a background blur. And I've talked about background blurs a lot. Probably a lot of you are sick of it as well. But you want to make sure that the background blur, especially if you have objects on top of it, is very subtle, right? If you were to do something like this, it's just a big accessibility problem, right? It's very difficult to see the icons down there. So you'll, one, want to blur it completely. So all the way to 50, right? And then you'll want to experiment with the brightness and the effect opacity. Now in this case, we want a darker version of this. So we're going to drop the brightness, let's say around 24. And right there, that could work, right? Now, depending on if you want to bring some color back in, you know, we did set a manual color with a little bit of purple in it. Then you can start experimenting with the effect opacity. And this will bring some of that color very subtly back in. And if I go ahead and adjust that color even more, right, you're going to notice that it is bringing it back in while also blurring it a little bit. Now, of course, we don't want the purple, although it's not terrible, but, you know, we can definitely do that. Right? So we have a little bit of background blur back there. And what's nice is once you have more content and you enable scrolling, right, that blur will kind of in real time update, which is really nice, right? And I'll just type out something like for you. Pop that about there. Maybe change the color to a little bit lighter. There we go. And of course, I would go through and add additional content, recommendations. I would add recently played, a big featured section at the top, possibly some stories at the top as well, because everything has stories these days, but that's for another day. All right, that's going to do it for me. For a big thank you to everyone who has tuned in. Kyle T. Webster is coming up in just a few moments, and I will see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.